Welcome to the Astrotherapy podcast. I am your host, Ciela Winter, and I am thrilled to dive deep into the inner realms of provocative thought while discovering an array of astrological and psychological insights to accompany us on this quest of self-inquiry. Welcome to this Scorpio full moon. And who doesn't love a full moon in Scorpio? Full moons were made to be in Scorpio. But this is not any full moon, not just any full moon, let's say, okay? The question for this week, how dare the underworld? And as I mentioned, this is not just any full moon, and this is not just any full moon in Scorpio. So does anyone out there also feel that the intensity of the recent astrology is somehow on purpose? Perhaps as a means of conveying a message of sorts? Me too. And I make up that the cosmic thunderous rhetoric of this decade, starting with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction just after the Cancer full wolf moon lunar eclipse in January of 2020, is less of an invitation and more of a coercion to attune with self-responsibility. So let's go back to that moment in 2020. Think about it, okay? So Saturn, Lord of Karma, Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, they came together in a very auspicious and foreboding manner as a seed planted at the initiation of a new decade. That seed was one of destruction of the false, patriarchal, and rigid structures that built the governance and systems that are now being reevaluated. And I'm not saying that the ideal result of the end of patriarchy is to be replaced by matriarchy. I honestly sense that a balancing act of the distinct feminine and masculine pillars, also found within our very being, is an important threshold that represents a gateway into self-knowledge. And I utilize the metaphor of the being in reference to patriarchy, matriarchy, which is also reflected in the external, right? The being, our personal relationship with ourself, our higher self, is the microcosm to the macrocosm, or maybe it's even vice versa. Who's to say that the reality that we're living in our external world isn't the microcosm to the macrocosm of the universe within us? As above, so below, as within, as without, we reflect and are reflected by the external world as a means of living and understanding our inner world. So, self-discovery, self-knowledge, self-responsibility, this is not about being selfish. It is rather that orienting toward looking within for the answers is an antidote to the distractions of the world. And, we look at that as a means of not just orienting ourselves, but also as opposed to the self-centered habitual ways of being that the majority of us have chosen in the current dogma of modern society. Pluto is now in Aquarius, and Aquarius is the kingdom of the social collective. Pluto is here to change our ways on a massive scale. Leave it to Pluto to go big or go home. Pluto's going big for sure in the next 18 years, let's say. So back to this full moon in Scorpio that is blessing us, April 23rd, 2024. This is a wake-up call, the kind of call that only true heroes and heroines are courageous enough to answer. You've heard this, answering the call on the hero and the heroine's journey. This is it. The sun is in Taurus, an earthy embodiment of our values and principles. The sun representing our vitality and really our orientation of our being. The moon is in Scorpio, the emotional resonance of black, silken, midnight waters. This is our emotional intelligence, our emotional connection, right? And Scorpio is pulling us into that part of the psyche. These two signs are in opposition to each other, Taurus and Scorpio, pulling the edges of a powerfully sensual and deeply transformative spectrum of being. The exquisite finale and cherry on top of this full moon is a T-square with Pluto in Aquarius. With both the sun and the moon squaring Pluto, the intensity of the full moon is now amplified to a precarious degree. So what does this mean for you? Depending on where and which houses the T-square aspect falls in your personal chart, and if you don't know, you know where to find me. We can always do a reading for you, and I highly recommend learning your natal chart if you are at all interested in astrology as a means of basically a launch pad for a whole new level of inner work and self-discovery. And if you have had your chart read, then just know that's the beginning of a very wonderful and fruitful relationship with your inner zodiacs and galaxies. Okay, so back to our regular scheduled programming. Depending on where in which the houses that this T-square aspect falls in your personal chart, you are being given an opportunity to transform your psyche in a radical and permanent way. Regardless, this opportunity comes from a Plutonic Aquarian realm, which may have us all rethinking our individual participation within the whole of humanity and how our lives can be utilized towards solution rather than a continuation of the ongoing lists upon lists of problems we are facing together. So think about the alchemical transmutation of fire. For example, it comes through, it burns, it destroys, and it turns everything to ash. That is a permanent end to what once was. And yet, amidst the ashes themselves, the phoenix rises as a symbol of rebirth from the void of what has been and the beginning of what will be. Becoming a solution is a choice that requires a restructuring of our lives, levels of comfort, perspective, and priorities. This moon is just another chapter in the story of our collective metamorphosis during the decade of 2020 to 2030. So burn bright, my friends. I hope the recent Uranus-Jupiter conjunction illuminated unexpected possibilities for your potential. May you transform and rise this Scorpio full moon as a phoenix within your own heart, mind, and body temple. All my best to you, and please receive the peace of my heart that lives inside these words.